Serial killers are some of the most terrifying people in history. Their crimes are so shocking and brutal that they leave entire communities scared for years. But there's something about these stories that grabs our attention. We can't help but wonder, what makes someone capable of doing such horrible things? Why do they commit these crimes, and how do they get away with it for so long? In this video, we're going to look at 8 of the scariest serial killers in history. These people committed crimes so disturbing that they've become infamous around the world. From Jack the Ripper, who terrorized London in the 1800s, to Ted Bundy, who used his charm to hide his violent nature, each killer has a story that will send chills down your spine. Some, like Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy, shocked everyone with how gruesome their crimes were. Others, like Elizabeth Bathory, have stories that sound almost like myths. But before we start, I just want to say I'm on a road to reach 1,000 subscribers as a small channel. If you want to support me, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think of this video. Now, let's dive into the chilling world of history's most frightening serial killers, Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is one of the most infamous serial killers in history, and what makes his story even scarier is that he was never caught. His reign of terror took place in 1888 in London's Whitechapel district, an area known for poverty and crime. Over the course of a few months, he brutally murdered at least 5 women, all of whom were sex workers. These killings became known as the Whitechapel murders, and they shocked not just London, but the entire world. What set Jack the Ripper apart was the brutality of his crimes. His victims were not only killed, but also mutilated in ways that suggested the killer had medical knowledge. This detail led to endless speculation about who the Ripper might have been: a doctor, a butcher, or maybe even someone with ties to the royal family. Letters claiming to be from the killer were sent to the police and newspapers, with one signed Jack the Ripper, a name that stuck. Despite countless investigations and suspects over the years, Jack the Ripper's identity remains a mystery. This has turned him into a kind of legend, with books, movies, and theories keeping the story alive to this day. The fear he caused and the gruesome details of his crimes make him one of the most terrifying serial killers in history. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, partly because he didn't fit the typical image of a murderer. Bundy was charming, intelligent, and outwardly friendly, which made it even more horrifying when his crimes came to light. During the 1970s, he confessed to killing 30 women across 7 states, though the real number of victims may be much higher. Bundy's method was as terrifying as it was calculated. He often pretended to be injured, using crutches or a sling to appear helpless and lure women into helping him. Once they were close, he would overpower them, kidnapping and later killing them in isolated locations. His crimes often involved extreme violence, and some were committed in broad daylight, showcasing his confidence in evading capture. Bundy managed to escape from custody twice, adding to his infamy. During one escape, he went on to kill more victims, including 2 women in a sorority house in Florida. His trial became a media sensation, and Bundy took full advantage, acting as his own lawyer and playing up his charm in court. Despite this, he was convicted and eventually executed in 1989. What makes Bundy so terrifying is how he was able to hide his true nature behind a mask of normalcy. He was someone people trusted, a man who could have been anyone's neighbor, friend, or classmate. This duality is what continues to make him one of the most chilling serial killers of all time. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, is one of the most horrifying serial killers in history. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 men and boys in ways that shocked the world. His crimes didn't just involve killing, they also included acts of cannibalism, necrophilia, and gruesome experiments on his victims. Dahmer's targets were often young men, many of whom he lured to his apartment with promises of money or companionship. Once there, he drugged them before killing them. What made his crimes particularly chilling was his effort to keep souvenirs from his victims, including body parts that he stored in his apartment. Police found a freezer full of human remains as well as photographs documenting his crimes when they finally arrested him in 1991. What's even more unsettling is how long Dahmer went undetected. He lived in a crowded apartment complex, and neighbors had reported foul odors and strange behavior, but the police failed to connect the dots. In one tragic incident, Dahmer's victim, a young boy who had escaped, was returned to him by police after Dahmer convinced them it was a domestic dispute. Dahmer was eventually sentenced to 16 life terms in prison, but his time there was short-lived. In 1994, he was killed by another inmate. His crimes left a dark legacy, forcing society to confront issues like law enforcement bias, how predators operate, and the importance of listening to warning signs. Dahmer's combination of brutality, manipulation, and the bizarre nature of his actions makes him one of the most terrifying serial killers the world has ever known. John Wayne Gacy. Owen Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, is one of the scariest serial killers in American history. In the 1970s, he murdered at least 33 young men and boys in Illinois. What made his case so disturbing was how normal he seemed to everyone around him. Gacy was a successful businessman, well-liked in his community, and even performed as a clown at kids' parties. No one would have guessed what he was really hiding. Gacy would trick his victims by offering them work, a ride, or just pretending to be friendly. Once he got them to his home, he would use handcuffs and pretend it was part of a magic trick before attacking them. Most of his victims were strangled to death, and he buried their bodies in the crawl space under his house. When he ran out of room, he started dumping bodies in nearby rivers. For years, Gacy got away with his crimes because he seemed like such a regular guy. Even though several young men went missing and were connected to him, no one suspected him at first. It wasn't until 1978, when a teenager went missing after meeting Gacy, that police started to investigate. What they found shocked the world. Gacy was arrested and later confessed to his crimes. He was sentenced to death and executed in 1994. What makes Gacy so terrifying is how he hid such terrible crimes behind a normal, friendly personality. He's a reminder that evil can sometimes look just like everyone else. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos is one of the most well-known female serial killers in history, and her story is both tragic and terrifying. Between 1989 and 1990, she murdered 7 men in Florida. Wuornos claimed that most of her killings were in self-defense, saying the men had tried to assault her while she was working as a sex worker. However, the brutal nature of her crimes painted a darker picture. Wuornos would often pick up her victims while hitchhiking or working on the highways. After killing them, she would steal their money, cars, and other belongings. Her method of killing was usually shooting, and the violence of her actions shocked investigators. What made her story stand out was her claim that the killings were a result of years of abuse and trauma she had suffered throughout her life. Aileen's life before the murders was filled with hardship. She grew up in a broken home, was abandoned by her parents, and became homeless at a young age. Her experiences with violence and exploitation shaped her troubled life, and some people saw her as both a victim and a predator. Wuornos was eventually caught after police tracked her using items she had stolen from her victims. She confessed to the murders and was sentenced to death. In 2002, she was executed by lethal injection. Her story has been the subject of books and movies, most notably the film Monster, which portrayed her complex and tragic life. What makes Wuornos such a haunting figure is how her life of hardship seemed to feed into her crimes. Her case is a chilling reminder of how trauma and violence can shape a person, sometimes in the darkest ways. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo, also known as the Butcher of Rostov, is one of the most terrifying serial killers in history. Between 1978 and 1990, Chikatilo murdered at least 52 people, mostly women and children, in the Soviet Union. His crimes were not only brutal, but also deeply disturbing, as they often involved torture, mutilation, and cannibalism. Chikatilo preyed on people who were vulnerable, like runaways, children, and those traveling alone. He would lure his victims into isolated areas by offering them food, money, or assistance. Once they were alone, he would attack them in horrifying ways. His crimes went undetected for years because of a mix of poor forensic technology at the time and mismanagement by Soviet authorities. What made the case even more chilling was that Chikatilo led a seemingly normal life. He was married, had children, and worked as a teacher and factory worker. People who knew him thought he was quiet and polite, which made it even harder to believe he was capable of such horrific acts. Chikatilo was finally caught in 1990 after police used psychological profiling and surveillance to track him down. He confessed to his crimes in graphic detail, leaving investigators and the public horrified. He was sentenced to death and executed in 1994. What makes Chikatilo so frightening is how he managed to hide his monstrous nature for so long, blending into society while committing such brutal crimes. His story is a grim reminder of the dangers of trusting appearances and how predators can exploit the vulnerabilities of others. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, is one of the most prolific and chilling serial killers in history. Lopez is believed to have killed over 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru during the 1970s and 1980s. What makes his story even more terrifying is how he targeted some of the most vulnerable members of society, often preying on poor children from rural areas. Lopez would approach his victims in marketplaces or remote villages, luring them away with promises of gifts or work. Once he had them alone, he would brutally assault and kill them, often burying their bodies in shallow graves. His crimes went unnoticed for years because many of his victims came from marginalized communities where missing children were sadly common and often overlooked by authorities. Lopez's horrific spree only came to light when he was caught trying to abduct another girl in Ecuador. During his interrogation, he confessed to hundreds of murders, even leading police to mass burial sites where he had hidden many of his victims. The scale of his crimes left investigators and the public in shock. But what's even more disturbing is that Lopez was released from prison in 1998 after serving just 14 years. Due to Ecuador's laws at the time, he was let go on good behavior and has since disappeared. His current whereabouts remain unknown, and many fear he could still be committing crimes. Pedro Lopez's case is a chilling reminder of how predators can thrive in areas where poverty and neglect make it easy to exploit the vulnerable. The sheer number of his victims and the lack of justice for so many of them make his story one of the darkest in history. Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory, often called the Blood Countess, is one of history's most infamous and terrifying figures. A Hungarian noblewoman born in 1560, she is alleged to have tortured and killed hundreds of young women in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. While the exact number of her victims remains uncertain, some accounts claim she murdered as many as 600 girls, making her one of the most prolific killers in history. Bathory's crimes took place in her castle, where she would lure young girls under the promise of work or education. Once inside, she reportedly subjected them to brutal torture, including beatings, burning, and mutilation. The most shocking rumors suggest that she bathed in the blood of her victims, believing it would keep her youthful, a detail that has turned her into a figure of legend. Her reign of terror came to an end in 1610 when King Matthias of Hungary ordered an investigation into the mysterious disappearances surrounding her estate. When authorities raided her castle, they discovered evidence of her crimes, including bodies and prisoners. Elizabeth was arrested and put on trial, though her noble status spared her the death penalty. Instead, she was imprisoned in a small room in her castle, where she died 4 years later, though some historians argue that the allegations against Bathory were exaggerated or politically motivated. Her story remains one of the darkest in history. Whether myth or fact, Elizabeth Bathory's reputation as the Blood Countess has cemented her place as one of the most frightening figures of all time. Serial killers like these leave behind stories that are both horrifying and fascinating. From Jack the Ripper's mysterious crimes to Elizabeth Bathory's legendary brutality, each case reveals the darkest sides of human behavior. These individuals didn't just take lives, they changed entire communities, leaving scars that still linger. By studying their actions, we hope to understand how such evil happens and how to prevent it in the future. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm on my journey to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means the world to me. Thank you for watching.